Welcome to MSVU History Department Podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Liu. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for hosting the podcast.
And well, I have some questions for you today. I'm going to start with the fact that everyone knows you are relatively new to Mount St. Vincent, right? And what drew you to Mount as a place to teach and conduct research?
First of all, I would like to say, um, when I came to Halifax, the first time was actually my job interview. The city immediately gives me very good impressions. The living environment, the sea, the mountain. And then when I arrive at the university, I feel even better about the whole experience. Job interview is supposed to be very nervous, anxious, but I realized there is a very supportive department here. All the colleagues seems very, very nice.
That's true, I agree.
Yeah, and then there are great teachers and researchers. And as I know the university more, I realized the university also focus on teaching and research excellence, and in particularly small class size liberal arts education. And all seems to be perfect fits for my vision as for myself as a researcher and as a teacher. So I'm very glad that I can join the month. Yeah.
Well, I believe that the department is also glad and happy to have you here. And I was checking that your current book project explores small scale and decentralized technologies in Mayosti. How do I pronounce that?
Uh, a Maoist,
Maoist China. And why is this period important? And I also would like to ask something like related to that. Your research moves across global history, China, and environmental history. So when did you realize these areas need to be studied together rather than separately?
Okay. So these two are two good questions about my research topic. I'm glad you immediately spot these key clues in my research project. So I was first drew to the field of science, technology, and their historical relationship to environment. Because of my personal experience with science and technology. I really like to fix things by myself since a very, very young age. I grew up with Game Boy Advance, Windows XP, and MP3, and I fix them frequently. I mean, I just think personal consumer electronics at that time were much easier to break down, and I had a lot of experience with that. And these interests continue to shape my technology activism and hobbies today. I'm still very active in the right to repair movement. I do believe every consumer have their rights to just repair their own things instead of planned adolescence and just buying a new iPhone every year. I still replace my phone's battery, and then I also strongly advocate for epistemic justice and a redefinition of the relationship between technology and society. I have been keeping thinking about how new technology redefine the relationship between individuals and society. For example, the issue regarding privacy and the usage of AI.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's very prevalent to everyone in the society. But these remain as hobbies or non-academic activism for me for a long time. It's only until I attended graduate school I began to think myself as a professional historian. But even that, at that point, at the beginning, I'm interested in becoming a historian of labor, a more traditional historian. I'm still a historian of labor, but at that time I was thinking of the more traditional approach. My project at that time was looking at how the Cold War as a historical context shaped the experience of workers and ethnic minorities and social inequality in a mining community in the context of China at that time. And how does this experience different from similar cities in Soviet Union and United States. I guess you can say the mining part is already there. The global part is also already there because it's Cold War. I think we should think about the whole historical context together. But as my research moves forward, I further and further realized that it was very difficult to think about the work experience and the experience of inequality without thinking about technology and environment, more particular how the biases and inequality disproportionately impact certain social groups such as women and ethnic minorities in terms of environmental harm caused by irresponsible usage of mining technologies. Yep, so then I move forward to that topic, and then I suddenly realized it really opens a new window for me to combine my, which at that point was still more like a side project thing of technology activism, and my research interest. And I think it also enabled me to pay attention to something I was not fully aware of, which was actually the Maoist China at that time was having this very radical experiment of pushing forward the development of small and decentralized technology. The rationale actually, although the Maoism used its own language, so if you just read the primary source, and it takes some time to realize that, it actually reflects some quite contemporary concerns. For example, why people do not typically think women embody the image of a tech-savvy or scientific type of person. There's a long-term bias against women scientists or women's ability to become top scientists.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, actually.
Right? And then we also have another thing was in the context of Canada was this bias and discrimination against indigenous knowledges.
True.
And their understanding of the environment is always a heated debate in any oil development projects, right? And then, so how these things come into beings. And then I realized China actually was concerned with similar issues under the radical ideology of the Cultural Revolution and the Maoism at that time. Yeah, they were actually thinking they directly link this bias in science and technology and how ethnic minority, women, and the working class disproportionately suffer from this bias with class inequality. In their own language, they believe these are all part of the class inequality. So it's actually, I believe that Maoism contribute to some development of the original Marxist idea of class inequality by actually putting more thoughts into science and technology, and the epistemic injustice, although the Chinese revolutionaries at that time did not use this phrase in our contemporary language. And I found their solution, their proposed solution, which eventually failed, was quite fascinating. Was they believe we should, by changing the format of technology, making it more decentralized, so it did not require large capital, did not require college certificate, and did not require how should I say college years of training, which eliminate all this barrier, which means no matter what is your social, economical, and gender background, you can immediately use this technology to empower yourself. I figured that was a very interesting approach. And then the other one was they have this idea that everyone has the right to know science and technology when it concerns public interest. So they have this very radical project of mandatory community and non-expert or like lay people participation in the approval of research funding in research and in science and technology research design. So just imagine using a more familiar contemporary example, just imagine that one day every university science project has to be approved by a council, and that the council has to include community member, and then even non-college students and non-professors can engage and apply to become RA or even lead the project.
Okay.
So I think these are very radical ideas and surprisingly relevant to our rethinking of the relationship between society and technology. So that's why I believe China provides very valuable historical lessons, for us to think about global histories and environmental and technology histories. And because they try to solve some long-term historical problems related to how unregulated technology or undemocratic and non-transparent technology might lead to social inequality and environmental harms and social bias against certain groups, certain social groups. And so by following these line of thinking, I further realized that I can connect China with this overall global movement of environmentalism and science activism since the 1970s. Well, since the 1970s, many people realized there was this big issue when you just trust all these technocrats, which means officers inside the government, or leading figures of large technological company to decide everything about technology, and then this could easily leading to disastrous effects, because when they consider technology, sometimes they only consider their own interests of their own companies or their own governments, and sometimes they may easily ignore the public health or of commoners. For example, in any industrial or energy development project, it's a very common concern. And since the 1970s, then people, I think globally, people become more and more aware of this issue, and there are more regulation, and there are more democratic institutions to try to introduce community opinions into science, technology, and development when it concerns environmental issue and health issue. But I think actually the Chinese experience can even further our thinking in this front due to some of its very radical ideas, and actually the failure of the implementation of these ideas. I'm one of the historians that believes studying failure is actually more important than study success, because you can learn more lessons from that.
It makes it makes more sense, yes.
Yeah.
Because we say that we should learn from like our past mistakes, right? Not to repeat them. But it's very interesting what you said about technology and environment, because nowadays we can see this more with this huge explosion of AI.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So you just joined the department at the right time.
yeah. I do appreciate how the university and the department here also really value the discussion of the contribution of what a historian of science, technology, and environment can make.
Yeah.
And we with case studies on China and global histories. And another thought was that I'm not trying to romanticize all these radical experiments and these historical attempts and redefinition of science and technology and environment. Because if they all succeed, we wouldn't have issues today, right? They're all deeply flawed, and we certainly are scholars, and also we need to work with community members and many other social groups and political forces to really redefine the relationship between society and technology. And I do believe that it's a major direction for new direction for scholarly research, but also for the general political development or political change that many nations are thinking about.
Yeah, that's right. And I was just like start to think a lot of stuff here that I am highly interested now in your course.
I'm very glad that you are intrigued. Yeah.
Yeah, because I like this part that, well, I've studied in different countries, so I like this part that you say, I don't try to romanticize.
Yeah, romanticized.
And I think this is important because we, like, as a student, we need to be like encouraged by our professors to think clearly about things.
Yeah, be critical. Yeah.
And you need to have like critical, but you also need to be a little bit cold about the topic you are discussing or thinking of. So I really like this about like Mount in general, because the whole, like, all the professors here, they have this a very like very critical thinking approach. And speaking of that, how is your teaching approach? And I would like to know a little bit more about your winter courses as well.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So I am teaching two courses for this semester. The first one is global environmental histories,
Okay.
and the other one is world history, the modern part.
Okay.
The global my approach to general history education is that I understand that cultural literacy is very important, and that's how people traditionally understand history education. So students come to the classroom, and then they learn about things, facts, events, and details, and then all the key things that shaped the world in the past and in the present. That's what we call cultural literacy. You understand things. I do believe that's still an important part. So both of my course cover that. For example, for the global environmental history, I teach students about some large changes that happen in the relationship between environment and the human. For example, how human adopted agriculture, and then forever changed the world. And then the Little Ice Age, which was which was a long, colder period, a long and colder period in history, and then was the idea of the great acceleration, which went after the industrialization, that humans' ability to impact the environment grew to an unprecedented level, and the usage of oil and steam power, these important events in environmental histories. But what's more important, I think, for a college history course is to teach students have what you say a critical thinking approach, and the basically what I like to call is this alert or alarm in your mind that when you hear something, no matter in public political debates or in the outside the college or inside the college, you immediately have the sense that you might need more evidence, more data, or you want to do more research to come to an informed decision, because many things are not black and white, and
Yes.
the rarely things are that easy as they sound. So and I think history education can really give students a chance to see the complexity of common social, political, and environmental phenomenon. Yeah, so for the world history as well, for the world history, it's a first year course, and as you see, it's very broad. World history technically can include everything, so it's always difficult to balance. Look, unlike global environmental history, we have environment as a focus, but as world history, it's always difficult to balance cultural literacy with critical thinking. My approach is that to really choose some prominent cases. For example, I try to remind students of the significance of nomadic people and nomadic empires, because we usually think about world history from the large sedentary so-called leading civilization like Roman Empire, like Chinese Empire. But how about Turkish peoples? How about Mongolian? How about the Hunnic empires? How about those nomadic peoples' contribution to world history as culture intermediaries in the Eurasian War? And how about Mali Empire and Ghana Empire, those empires in West Africa, many people were not aware of. And through these cases, I try to remind students how the traditional understanding that build on a very Eurocentric and sedentary-centric will are too simplistic. And then I hope like this kind of way of thinking can inspire students to always be more critical when they exam or study anything. They have this alert and alarm in their mind that I might need to do more research, and I might need to recognize the limitation of my own knowledge and the complexity of what I try to understand.
So your teaching approach is basically develop a sense of awareness of what you are actually receiving as an information. This is really important. And right now, do you still have spots on your courses?
Yes, both courses still have available spots.
Okay.
So for any students who are interested, you can still enroll for the course. And then for the global environmental history course, currently it's a special topic course, third year. So it's a very small class size. It's gonna be discussion intensive, but we're gonna explore a lot of interesting topics that traditionally students don't think a history course will exam, like the climate change, and then how rice and wheat works much better for state power than potato and corn. So this kind of intersection between science and politics and history is gonna explore that a lot. And for the world history as well, and I think we have a decent class enrollment this year, about 20 students, but still not too large. We can still have some very interactive and experience and more discussion about important topics in world histories. If you're interested, for any students, if you're interested in the course of world history, also don't worry about that. You have to remember everything about every country in the world. We will be more selective, and the ultimate target is teach you not only how to catch a fish, it's actually be more critical and actually think where you should go to catch a fish.
Oh yeah, it's the question behind the question.
Yeah,
right?
The question behind the question. Yeah, that's a really great way to say that, yeah.
So thank you for today, and it was my pleasure to have this interview, and I hope I see you around.
Yeah. I will see you around as well.